I can see we have a quorum today. Can we have a motion to
Madam
approve?
President, I move that we adopt the agenda as printed.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by a show of hands. Before we get started, as y'all have probably figured out, I have something to say. And today I am speaking for Claire Wheel, not the board. I'm speaking for myself. There is probably nobody in the city of Montgomery that is a bigger champion of the arts than I am. I've spent most of my life as a working musician, owned an art gallery at one time, and have supported the arts all my life. To our friends at BTW and Baldwin, I've received your letters, calls, texts, and emails. There's been a silence on my part because I don't have the answers yet. We've been working on the issues, and 2 principals have been given possible solutions. But please be patient and know that many hours have been spent in trying to find permanent solutions and will continue until we get there. I understand that the arts magnets are an integral part of the landscape of Montgomery and will fight to keep them and even enhance their offerings. But as with all MPS schools, we're in a difficult time. State Superintendent of Education Eric Mackey has said that state unit allocations are set by legislative budget action. None of us wants to lose any programming in any schools, but MPS cannot go bankrupt or all innovative programs could be endangered. About the RIF. When all is said and done, there will be a reduction of over $12 million in the budget. Unfortunately, it includes teachers, support staff, central office staff, and others. There's a mistaken idea that you can run a school system of this size with no one at the helm at central office. It simply doesn't work that way. As to teachers, this adjustment is years in the making. No question it's painful. While the best solution would require the citizenry to step up to the plate and approve an ad valorem tax increase so we can increase, not decrease, the number of teachers, but we must deal with our current reality. And that reality is living within what we can afford and what is allowed by law. Now, I'm an optimist. I believe that once our budget is in order, which this RIF accomplishes, we can budget and work our way out of the current situation. I also believe that if Montgomery is as outraged as it seems to be, then we can come together to increase ad valorem taxes to adequately fund our schools. We are going to move now into information to receive. We're going to start with Mrs. Ebony Evans with our health services update.
Good evening. My name is Ebony Evans, and I am the Marketing Director for Health Services Incorporated. I'm here tonight to present you all with an update on health services implementing our school-based clinics. You all received a packet from my COO, who is also with me this evening, Mr. Terry Reed. And in your packet, you will find not only the consent forms, also a letter from our CEO, Mr. Gilbert Darrington, and just a brief update on what we have going on in your presentation packet. So to begin with, we did pick 4 schools. We're going to try 2 separate implementation regimens to see what best works for not only HSI but also works for MPS, because we want to be a great working partner. So we're going to see which best fits our co-partnership. So at Bellingrath and Highland Gardens, we're going to implement a health center inside of the school. And that means that construction has already taken place in those rooms that have been provided to us by MPS, and equipment has already arrived at those schools. So the provider and the medical assistant will be inside of the school running that school-based clinic, and both of those will be operated on Mondays through Fridays. Bellingrath will be 7 a.m. to 3:30, and Highland Garden will be 8 a.m. until 4:30. Now, at Chisholm and Davis Elementary, we do have an HSI mobile health unit. That mobile health unit has inside of it a registration area, and in it has 2 patient rooms on either side of it. So it is a tractor trailer, but it is able to service 2 patients at a time through our providers. And so we will take that to Chisholm on Fridays from 8 a.m. until 3 o'clock p.m., but it will be closed for lunch from 12 to 1 o'clock. And then it will be at Highland Gardens on Monday and Wednesday, 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. So we're just trying to see which best works for MPS and which best works for HSI. Also, just on
Can you clarify this? Can other students from other schools come over there?
So right now we have talked with Dr. Moore, and we just said, just to begin with, let's get our feet wet. Let's just see the students that are in that school particular. So we're not going to see Davis students at what's closest to it, Highland Garden or Bellingraph. We're not going to bring Davis from Davis to Bellingraph. We're just going to see Bellingraph students at Bellingraph and Davis at Davis. As we further on, if it works out well for us, we want to be in as many schools as possible, or if we find it better to transport students, whichever works for us. But just to get our feet wet, we do want to only see those students and faculty that is at that current school. Any other questions so far? Just ongoing, we want to be a resource and an active participant in all school events. So as far as PTA meetings, staff meetings, coming to board meetings and giving a regular update, we want to be, like I said, a working partner. So we want to give you all updates, get your feedback, what you feel is not working as far as the board and as far as the faculty at the different schools, what is working and what is not working. And then our point of contact, you have my information as well as Terry Reed. You can contact us with anything, any questions that you have, or if you want us to come out and speak at a particular event. We have been to a lot of events bringing out the mobile unit, and that's really what kind of got the conversation going between Dr. Moore and Mr. Darrington about how can HSI better help MPS, and we believe that healthy students are better students, and we want to eliminate that barrier to health care, eliminating those parents from maybe having to take off of work and then bring their child probably to one of our clinics anyway, eliminating that altogether. They have to sign the consent form to be seen. There is no around that, no question about that. You have to fill out a consent form to be seen, and once that is taken care of, we can take care of that child.
Will the forms be handed out at the beginning of school to
Yes, so we had a small gathering at the 4 clinics, and we had teams at each clinic for the beginning of summer school, and we passed out information there. We want to do that on a bigger scale. Like I said, we were just getting our feet wet with the summer school, so we kind of know how it's going to work. But for the first day of school, we want to roll out the red carpet. We do want press there. We do want big information there, that we are there to service those children and to bring positive light on what's going on with MPS, and we believe that this partnership is a positive light of what's going on. So we will be able to get those forms out. We did get some of those forms out to students before they left, but we will resend them. But as far as right now, we're just waiting on the Medicaid numbers to see those patients inside of the schools, and then we're really ready to roll. But as far as getting that information out, yes, ma'am, we will be there on hand. If anybody needs any extras, we're ready to print them off and get them to everyone.
We're just so happy to have you all.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
yes.
Thank you. We thank you for this.
Very
Thank
grateful.
you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Okay. Ms. Gillis, summer school, evening academy hours, hourly rate?
Good evening
Good evening.
to our board president, our other board members, and to our superintendent. In your packet, you should have received a memo that says hourly rate of pay. See that? You see it? No? Dr. Moore, would you hold yours up, please?
It's this.
Yes. It's a very brief memo.
Just go on real fast.
Look, lady.
Yeah, that's it. Just a memo.
Yeah.
Dr. King. Is this the Ed Richardson memo?
No,
No.
this. It's about the hourly rate of pay.
It's hourly rate of
Farmer.
pay.
No, this is the Ed Richardson.
Oh, yeah, it was behind the agenda.
Okay, it's with y'all.
It's the very first one.
Okay.
Oh.
Are we good?
It was in your packet.
Okay.
Okay, are we good?
It was in our package. I'm just moving.
It's only a couple of lines.
Pass this thing, can look on.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and explain what it is. In 2006, it was May 22nd of 2006. At the time, Carlinda Purcell, Dr. Purcell was the superintendent, and she sent out a memo about what the hourly rate would be for summer school and any other additional duties that we have at the central office level and at the school level. If the schools had an evening academy, what do we pay them? We paid them $25 an hour. Well, when the auditors came in last week, they wanted to see that memo. You can imagine the time that it took to find a 13-year-old document, but I will say Leslie did hunt it down for us so that we could show it to the auditors. That was well before me, of course, but she was able to hunt it down, and we really appreciate that. But the auditors said that it would be a good idea to bring that back to you so that it's a current document. It's not 10 years plus old. So that's the purpose of it. It says the exact same thing pretty much, is that for extra work, we pay $25 an hour to our teachers for any additional work that they do outside of their contract day. Any questions about that?
Thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Watts.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Madam Superintendent. You should have before you the financial statement for the month of April, which is the 7th month of fiscal year 2019. That's about, the 7th month represents about 58% of the fiscal year. Okay. In the financial statement, you should have first explanation of financial data. That's just a brief statements that I present that really speaks to the financial conditions of the school district. Financial statement also consists of definition of accounting terms that provides a brief overview of our accounting terms such as assets, liabilities, revenues, and thus. Snapshot analysis provide a brief overview of our financial position as of April of 2019. Monthly budget percentages, again, we are in the 7th month of the fiscal year, which represents 58% of our fiscal year, 7 divided by 12. A statement of cash flow provides a list of our monthly expenditures and revenues from October to current. Then, of course, we have a pie chart that also outlines the cash outflows, and then we have our F combined statements of all fund types. I would just say, Madam President, as you all know, the Education Trust Fund budget has passed the state legislature, and the governor has signed that into law. We are somewhat excited that there was an increase in funding, of course, because we lost teacher units. Then it does negatively impact our school district. We still lost about 40 units, which is based on our student population, thus costing us still about $3 million. So of course, as I stated last month, that $3 million had to be added to the $10 million. That's how we came up with the $13 million.
So Mr. Watson, let me clarify, what you're saying here is we need, what you got here is 2.8 million.
Well,
So instead of being 10 million in debt, we're really 12.8?
yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So I just did an approximate there. but you are correct. I do want to say that, again, while we're somewhat excited that we are seeing increases in the Education Trust Fund, I want us to just keep in mind that when you take under consideration the rate of inflation, all of the things that have happened since 2008, our revenues in our state for education is still about $1 billion, or it's been estimated about $1 billion short of where we should be from 2008 to current. So we are excited that Education Trust Fund revenues are growing, which are mainly our sales taxes and our state income taxes. They are growing, and we're excited about the economy. But we still have a long way to go in our state to truly fund education. Madam President.
Thank you. Any questions about the financial statements? Then we probably would move right into the fiscal year 2019 amended budget.
Okay. The amended budget basically is it's an amendment of our 2019 budget that was presented in August. I think we did it. The budget was it August or September? August or September of our last year. As you know, we have to present a budget each year and have to submit it to the state by September 15th. We did submit our 2019 budget to the state of Alabama before September 15th of 2018. This indicates an amendment of that budget. Therefore, the amended budget includes carryover funds. These are funds that were expended in 2018. However, there were some funds that were left over. For example, let's just say in Title I. Let's say in Title I, we had a total of $15 million in 2018. And let's say we spent $14 million in 2018. Well, we can carry over that $1 million for 2019, but we must include that in the amended budget. So that's what the amended budget is. It also includes any additional grants that the state or federal government may have provided us during fiscal year 2019. For example, there are some small robotic grants and computer initiative grants that the state provides us as well. And so we also have to include those in our amended budget. The largest part of this amended budget include, and you may have heard about this, about $8 million, of course, was allocated for Montgomery Public Schools. Money is called ETF Advanced and Technology. These are dollars that the legislature provided us basically for renovation and the maintenance of our schools. It's basically what those dollars are for. Now, those dollars, of course, was approved in this past Education Trust Fund budget. However, the legislature and the governor wrote that in a way so that those monies would be readily available for us now so that we can start on some of our roofing projects, HVAC projects, and some of the maintenance projects that we have already allocated. So we also budgeted for that. I think, Chad here, I think there's about a $2.5 million allocation for HVAC at Jeff Davis. There are some roofing projects at several of our schools. I can't think of all of the schools.
Brubaker Middle is about 1.7 million. We have Robert E. Lee, the math building is about $240,000. We're finishing up Impact, which was total project of about $830,000. And then the Floyd Middle project is finishing up as well. And then also, those are your main things that ended up supporting those funds.
So those funds were allocated, of course, for renovations and pretty much the fixing of the schools. We're also looking at the possibility of using,
What was allocated to JD? I missed that one. That was your question.
2.5 million to finish.
the HVAC, I think.
The HVAC. And you didn't give us Floyd Middle. Was it?
Floyd Middle, I did. They've been working on that, but it's part of the amendment. It was carried over. It's just the scope of the project. It took a little bit longer, but it is part of that amended budget.
But what's the dollar amount? What I was asking.
Dollar amount, I don't have that right.
Okay.
That was before my time.
Okay.
I'll get that for you, though, Dr. Keith. I'll get that for you.
Madam President, real quick, Mr. Weiss, what was the total of that ETF advancement in technology that we received?
It was about 7,923,000, it's close to $8 million, approximately $8 million. 7,000,009 something. There were also some federal dollars also that we carried over. For like Title II, there's some Title I dollars that we carried over. I think the total title dollars that we carried over was approximately about $2.7, $2.8 million in total federal dollars that we carried over for fiscal year 2019. But again, these are dollars that were allocated and budgeted in fiscal year 2018. However, we didn't expend all of those funds then, so we were not going to send it back to the federal government. So we were allowed to carry over those funds and budget it in our amended budget during fiscal year 2019. Now those funds have to be expended in fiscal year 2019. And so we did work with the program managers, they worked with the schools to budget these funds for FY 2019. Now this ETF monies that we're talking about, this $8 million, these monies will be set aside to work on those projects that Mr. Anderson just spoke about. But these federal dollars, they have to be expended during this fiscal year. So Ms. Otola and Mr. Mitchell, they've already worked with our program folk along with the schools to allocate and budget those funds.
We won't have any trouble getting those executed.
None whatsoever. We can use some more.
I understand. Any other questions on the amended budget? Thank you, Mr. Watts. Montgomery Humane Society program. Dr. Moore?
We have a letter that's in your, packet, and, Ms. Bailey had asked, I believe it was, to have this shared with the board, so I don't know if she has any comments that she wants to make on that.
Yes, it was a program that used to be in the school several years ago, and not Dr. Moore, but before that, the program was eliminated, and it's it's a partnership with the Humane Shelter. They go into first grade, spend 30 minutes called Reading to the Paw. It gets children very comfortable. It's very soothing. Also, so many children, they're scared of dogs. I know this sounds kind of silly, but you know, they're afraid of dogs, or they've been exposed to fighting dogs. And this also allows them an opportunity to see a dog in a different arena. And so Ms. Hughes had asked me, you know, if it would be okay to write a letter, and hopefully we could get this program implemented back into the schools. It really, you know, a lot of times the children who are having trouble reading, the teacher will have them come out for extra time. And so I hope that we can find a way to put this in. It's just for first grade. It's 30 minutes in each class. They go to all the first grade classes in those schools.
Thank you. We're going to share this info with the elementary principals.
Okay, thank you.
Move into information regarding staffing, Students First Act, RIF policy, and the RIF plan by category. Dr. Moore?
Okay, so I will yield to Ms. Smith. She made this request, so we submitted the documents that we had on hand at the time, Thursday.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure exactly what you want to go with that, so we'll do what we can with it.
Okay, well, I sent questions and I did not know that was gonna be deferred to, so just to start with the first one, as far as the information regarding staffing, I guess I more so wanted to make a comment. In doing some, well, I'll just say this, we've got a plethora of emails with people with concerns about it. And I was wondering if there was any information put out to employees as to what was coming, that was communicated to them prior to it happening, because I think a lot of it is people felt a little blindsided. And if, you know, the information about a RIF was coming, if people communicated with them to tell them exactly what this means, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so I'll start and maybe HR can join in, but several months back, we started to use this document with principals to meet with them and share information about what their allocations looked like and what they might possibly have as reductions. And so then it's left up to principals to also go back and share that information with the people in their individual schools. So this information was given to them in ample time, and it was discussed one-on-one and also discussed in our leadership council, so that principals had the information they needed. We did not attach names to numbers or to units, but we did share this kind of information with principals.
So would you clarify, because it's been, I mean, it's out there, and I want to know, so I'm not asking, you know, I want to know, based on what you just said, you went to each, you took this form, numbers to our principals, and our principals are the ones that chose the ones that would be in the RIF. Is that what you're saying?
To some degree, yes, that is true. Our principals were given information about the number of units that they bought.
What's the other degree? If the principal,
Okay,
the
let me,
principal
well,
didn't
let me,
even
if
get
you
it.
don't mind.
I don't, I'm just asking.
Okay, well, let me-
I want to clarify.
I want to answer. Okay, principals were given this information about the units in their schools. They were also given, especially in middle and high schools, the leeway to look at their staff and decide, so if you're losing 3, which ones would those be based on numbers? So principals had some degree of flexibility in making those decisions. It's not quite that easy at the elementary level because you have captive little groups of 20 or 25 kids, and so you need 3 first grade teachers. You're gonna need 3, and then you might, if you're over 1, then it's based on the last one that was hired. A little bit different in elementary, but in middle and high school, for instance, they do have some flexibility to decide how they're gonna use those units and which one of the 3 they might reduce. So they do have that kind of flexibility to make
Are you
those
finished? Are you
decisions.
finished?
Yes, ma'am, I'm
Okay,
finished.
then let's cut through the chase and, who went to the magnet schools and are cutting our magnets?
Nobody went to the magnet schools. I think all the principals came here and met with staff to go over there. Now, at a magnet school, they had the same freedom as anybody else.
That may be true, but you're not even comparing apples to oranges. Magnets don't even have the numbers of students that these traditionals have, nor do they have the Title I funds.
That's
So
a good
I'm
point.
just cutting through the checks. It's not even on here, who went to the magnet schools, principals, and said, you can pick who you want, but we want this. That's,
The magnet
put
school,
that out on the table.
the magnet school principals, to answer your first question, had the option of deciding to some degree which ones they would reduce by and what area they would reduce in.
Still not answering my question, who's the other person? You just said the principal, but who went to the principal and said, that's okay, but we want these magnets gone?
We did not do that.
So that hasn't happened.
We did not tell, yes. Can you say that up there? Because we said, all I'm saying is you're still, to me, Kim, no disrespect, I ask, you gotta understand magnet and traditional are 2 different entities.
Yes.
Okay? They are two different entities. Somebody has gone to these magnets and chosen specific magnets to be gone. You cannot have a magnet school if you don't have the magnets there. And so what I want to know, and I appreciate you coming up there because that was the complaint on the last YouTube video, that they could not hear y'all. And you know me, when you're talking in circles, I'm gonna tell you you're talking in circles. I just want a simple yes, no. Was it the principal? Now I've got, well, to some degree it was. Now the other question is, what's the other degree? Give me the pie chart of who made these decisions on the specific magnets.
I'm gonna be real honest with you. If you could have been here, you could have waited so you can see the process. But,
I wasn't invited, but that's okay.
then normally not the person that. Let me go through the process of each magnet school principal, each traditional principal. And I just have to say it the way that it really is. I can't say it in the way that you might want to hear it, I just have to tell you what happened in the process. It may not be what you want to hear, but this is what happened.
Please.
We have a long table, I'm gonna give you a real description. We have a long table sitting here. We have directors from HR on this side, directors on this side, including the classified director, because also they may be losing paras, a bunch of different folks, or they may be adding those people. Then you have someone from special ed, the director there, the director from federal programs, and if we need someone from career tech, we have them there, because if they don't know what to do about career tech, they're there. This year, they didn't have a problem with career tech. The directors will say, give you an example. Kim, you're the principal of ABC School. You have this number of units in your school for 18-19. The state has given you this number. The difference is, you gotta lose 7. Which 7 do you wanna lose? You may not know right then, but you know you gotta lose 7. So then, what we tell them is, go try to make your master schedule. And some directors even call the school before to say, let you start thinking about this before time. You've got to make a master schedule. If you're a high school, there's certain things you have to have. If you're a magnet school, there's certain things you really need to have to stay a magnet. But you've got to work that out, because we're not in their schools every day. We're not. But the budget says that you can only have 20 units. You can't have 27. You work it out, you tell us, and then that's how you proceed from there.
But are we not, it is not fair to hold the magnet schools accountable when they don't have the same federal funds that every other traditional school has. You are cutting the very cord, veins, blood that makes them go. You cannot, if you cut arts or dance, these are what makes us shine. And for y'all to step in and put people and keep people at central office and shift and rob those children of that, there's something wrong with that. I'm
All
sorry, I
right,
didn't
all
mean to
right,
lose
Dr.
it.
Keith, let me just insert here that the state is who dictates how many,
This isn't the state. This is not the state.
the state dictates how many units can go to a
Where
school.
is the state right now? He's gone, and when does he speak up when he is here? What have they done to step in
Dr.
on this
Keith.
court chart?
Dr. Keith, may I add to your question? First of all, when it said that the state does it, the statement by Dr. Mackey tells you that a legislative act determines your allocation. And it is based on student enrollment from the prior year. So one of the things that I'm advocating with all of our schools, particularly with our magnet schools, I've had this conversation with principals, that if you allow more students to be enrolled in your school, then you can have an increase in your allocation of teachers. But if you stay at a cap of 300, 400, or whatever your cap is, that's the only allocation you're gonna get year after year after year.
May I ask a question? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Brown.
My thing is, and I don't know where Lisa's kind of with this, but when you go to the magnet schools and the traditional schools, you have to have X number of students per teacher. I don't care if that's at a magnet school or traditional school. So why should it be different at a magnet school than a traditional school? I don't understand your point, Lisa.
The traditional schools get federal funds, Mary.
But they still gotta be paid a salary.
Exactly.
Everybody's
But
paid
why
a
would you
salary.
take-
Okay.
why would-
May I address the federal funds piece, ma'am? Okay, federal funds, the title funds that we're talking about, that's considered compensatory
Right.
funds, compensatory supplemental education funds. It compensates for something that students who are low income may not be able to do.
Right.
Okay, so that's why we get that, those funds for certain schools, based on, mostly the poverty level is what it's based on. So every school does not receive federal funds. That allocation is not given. So in our balancing as a school district, we cannot give any school that is not Title I, say, more than what we would give to Title I. So we can't say to a Title I school that earns 20 units, you take part of your federal dollars, we're gonna give you 18 and you pay for 2 out of your allocation. We have to be equal across the board, and then federal is above and beyond what they would normally get from the state. So that's how that's set up. We didn't set it up, the Fed set it up that way. So we just have to follow the guidelines.
And you also have to look at the fact that we need to open up our magnet schools and let more students in, then they wouldn't be losing the units. See, they are losing the units because they don't have the students there. So it has nothing to do.
I am discussing that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay, I'm finished.
I'm discussing that with magnet school principals about the possibility, if your capacity at your building is more than
And if
whatever,
that's
that
so,
you
how
could
soon
enroll
can
a
we do
few
that?
more.
If that's so, how soon can we do that?
Okay.
That's great. And believe it or not, when we have these conversations, we say we lost X number of units because your enrollment dropped by 100 students or 14 students. All of that makes a difference. Every child makes a difference. For example, we had one magnet school a couple of years ago. They lost a unit because they were off by, guess what? One child. And there's nothing I can do to put that child back in there, because remember, Dr. Keith, it's 1 year in arrears. So what we do in 19, when we get that count, it's not gonna be good for this year. That will be good for the following year. We've encouraged the principals that have that low enrollment, that can hold more students. We've had that conversation with them to say, you wouldn't have to lose your this class, and I'm not gonna call a magnet out because it would pretty much tell you which one, if you would just invite the remainder of your slots in. Invite them.
And why keep them on a wait list when you're crying about losing units when you don't have the students?
So what is their reason for that? I mean, what is the reason for not having
More children.
You know what? I don't know.
Ma-
I want to speak for someone, but I don't know what their thinking is. All we do is tell them, like, for example, in order to earn a full assistant principal and those teachers, they need to have, the number says 500. The way that they calculate it, we always say, don't invite 500, because that's what happened to that other magnet school. They had just 500. We tell them do 513, 514, then there's no question about if you're 500 or above because you are. So we tell them, make sure that you give a little leeway. And if you have 13 more students, come on, guys, that's not so much when you spread them out into different classes that they can't handle those students.
Okay, I have a question about the system, the lottery system in which they're chosen. How does that work, and who has control over that? At one point, the teachers at the magnet school were able to interview their students and, choose, test, they were able to audition, and teachers were able to actually see, and they were put on the list, and the teachers had control and could tell who the students were. Now, I think people have been calling me because they're getting letters, and the letters have come in late, and some people are thinking that they were declined when the teachers at the school thought that they were on the list. So there has been some confusion in the process. So we need to go in, revisit the process, and try to come up with a better way, because we want to make sure that every child will be able to have the opportunity to get a great education. That is our goal here. Our children represent 24% of our population, but they are 100% of our future. and we must get this right.
I had,
Miss Mitchell, they are auditioning for the arts. They
arts.
still audition for the arts.
Yeah, I understand that they audition for the arts, but getting the letters out and the
Oh, yeah, the
information, and there are teachers who have been calling me, they're not sure, you know, people that they thought were accepted, they're finding out that the students don't know that they're accepted. So we're not getting the numbers, you know, accurate numbers. So we need to work on that process and get that straightened out.
It is something that we need to do a little better. Yes. We need to do a better job of it. And I think all of us working together, and maybe more of us getting involved with that process can make it.
all right, I have a couple of questions. One of them, when we talked about the cap, who has the authority to have the principals where the cap is set low to increase it? Because it seems like more authority is given to the principal. Does it need to go higher up? Like, does it start, you know, who does it?
I have started that discussion. You mean about the enrollment
Yeah.
caps? I've started that discussion with some of the schools where their cap is always the same and they're losing students, and we're sharing this information that here's how you can get more students if you increase your enrollment. Don't go beyond your capacity in the building, but you may increase it, and thereby, and that happens in any school. Any school that has an increase in enrollment over the year will get an additional number of units based on the number of students who enroll first 20 days after Labor Day. That's your average daily membership, and that's where that count starts. And so, but here's the other thing they have to remember. As much as possible, we need to get kids in school the first day of school, because that average will change. It will be less if you wait until the 20th day after September. So the earlier they enroll as a member, once they enroll as a member, you don't have to worry about it anymore. But the sooner we get them in, the more you can expect out of your allocations.
I'm gonna, can I follow up with you, Erica? I know you had another one, but this is part of that. I had the same question, and this is just being new, so I want to get a clear understanding. So it sounds like that the magnet programs are the decisions, like the enrollment and how many children can come to the magnet schools, that's decided by, is there someone over just magnet schools that makes that decision, or how is that?
From what I can see in my first year as superintendent, is that it has been more of a local school decision, magnet school.
So
And
the whole, everybody has not, like, the board has not been involved to say your building has a capacity of 500. It's been kind of a in-house thing that's kept kids out, because that was one of the questions I've had probably for the last 10 years, is why are we not expanding magnet schools? There are kids on waiting lists. Why? So,
She's right, and what she's saying is right.
I see the point. I mean, that's why I'm dealing with the principals at magnets.
but the
and seeing
principals
increase
work
more.
for MPS. I mean,
I
are they?
agree.
No, I'm asking. I'm truly asking, because I don't know.
I agree.
Are the principals at the magnet schools different than the principals at the traditional schools?
No, let me say this.
Are they? Are they?
No, ma'am, and I agree with you, and that is why I am saying you can enroll more kids if your building will hold them. If in the past you stopped at a certain number, whatever that number is every year in a magnet, then you're gonna get that allocation for that number of students, and that's all you're gonna get. In a traditional school where the kids are zoned, they move in, and whatever that neighborhood is, if it grows and more kids come in, they all go to that school. If it diminishes and kids move out, they tear down some housing, and that causes people to move, then their numbers may go down. A magnet school has more control, up or down, of how many kids can actually come into their building. So if we have a rule of thumb that says, based on what you do and based on your capacity, you could perhaps enroll another 50 or 100 kids in your program.
Okay, and so is that, I'm going to go with Ms. Smith, because she's taught me a lot about policy, but is that written down somewhere, like, okay, magnet principals, you know, here's your rule book over here, you get, so none of this is written down.
No,
This is just
no,
an
not from what I
arbitrary
can see.
number
Not from what I
that
can see.
Magnet School has just come up with, like,
Not from what I can see. There's nothing written that says you're gonna cap at a certain number, and
okay.
that's it.
So it's just always been that way, and that's why we stay in the box, I
Well,
guess.
we're gonna get out of the box,
Is
but.
it, it's, oh, go ahead.
Principals know capacity of their schools. For example, I've had one principal this year, early on in the year, I actually went to visit the school because they said, guess what, I can take more kids because I'm in a different building. I absolutely got back to the office and said, hey, this school, and I will not call it out because we can't do that, they can take more kids. Make sure that when we look at their enrollment and we start the magnet process, that we give that some consideration, that they can take more kids with. So principals understand, I think, that it's based on the capacity of your building. But also, if they don't know, that's our job to make sure that they know.
Okay, and that's a very good point too, is that the capacity of their building. So say we have a school over here who can hold 460 children, but we have 550 children who've applied to get into this magnet school.
And then we have schools that are sitting empty, so why are we not expanding magnet schools? My whole point is, why have we not been expanding them, and why are we not doing that now? Because there's a lot of room for them. I mean, there's room, so I'm still confused, and I probably will stay that way.
Let me see if I'm hearing you correctly. So if you have it's a couple of different things, even if you call it magnet or traditional. If you shift your population from your traditional over to a magnet, you still haven't necessarily increased the number of students that you have in your entire system. That's the first piece. So if a building, say a magnet building, can hold 500 kids, then it would stand to reason that a magnet school could enroll at least 500 kids. And then they could earn at 501 or 512 or 13, they could earn an assistant principal, as opposed to less than 500, you're not going to earn an assistant principal, but you might want the system to pick one up for you, which would have to come out of local money because you haven't earned it. So in shifting, two things can happen. You could perhaps enroll more kids in the whole system as it goes, or just more in the magnet, but you might shift them out of your traditional. So some of traditional school may be diminished because a magnet school is increasing. So there's a little balance that you want in there.
It is, except, you know, except then the children who have higher goals and can reach those, that they are given those opportunities.
Yeah, I think
So
that is a conversation that we need to, we can have, because in looking at how we do magnets and how we choose and how we select, and we have to be very careful that we don't create an issue for the system that has to do with certain biases and things like that. So we have to be careful.
I was gonna bring that up when I heard her. I know we had an OCR report, Office of Civil Rights, had had found some issues with some of the practices that we were doing in the past, especially when you have that hands-on with applications. And one of the things I found startling is when you said, well, it was teachers that said they thought a child had got in, and I'm like, well, how would they know? You know, I mean, that's what you said.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think they
But-
only had a 5-week enrollment
What?
period, and that closed in February. So why wouldn't we be doing a second round now I mean, if
I
we
think
did-
there is a time when they do a second drop in the spring, later on after the first drop. There is a time that they do that.
Look how close we are to the year, and what I'm saying is, we're not mentioning schools, but we also know, and I do know this, we were given a capacity report a couple of years ago. We haven't been given a capacity when the school burnt down. We won't name the name, but a school burnt down.
Oh, you can
okay?
say that.
And we moved it. Nobody's given us the capacity of that school.
It-
So once we know the capacity of that school, can we not build for this year to get these other teacher unions by doing a second round?
And
And
why
can
do
I-
we have to wait until the spring? Why can't we do it this summer and have,
Right, yeah, now.
have those students in the
ASAP.
schools?
Yeah.
come
Well,
start?
let me say this, and this is probably not something we can, I'll talk with Ms. Jill and the others about doing a second drop if there's space available in
Well,
those.
we
Now,
know
some,
there's space available, Dr. Moore.
yeah, and some of them, but not all. When we're talking magnets, I guess I'm talking
Yeah.
about all of
Well,
them,
can
not
we-
just,
This is a
Can-
huge concern.
Can
I
we
got
put this on the work session, for our next work session, so we can get the information?
okay, could you send me particularly what it is you would like for us to be
Since
able
it's-
to
it's a
discuss
hot topic,
with
so-
you?
Right, and if we don't have a work session in the near next, the near month before school starts, we need to call on it.
Okay,
For
we
this
can-
very purpose. This is
Yes.
statutory.
We can do that. I do know one school that, because they have no one on the waiting list, no one, from what I gather.
Do you know
left.
that if they are at capacity?
That they-
Or did
They are
say
not,
were at
they are not at capacity based on the physical plant. They're not at capacity. And I also know they don't have anyone, it's a high school, they don't have anyone on the waiting list. And so they are going to accept students. And sometimes the students come to town, they apply. If there's nobody on the waiting list in that grade, then I've said, then you may go ahead and enroll that kid, because there's no one on the waiting list in 11th grade. So it won't be taking the place of anybody else, because there's nobody on the waiting list for that grade.
Can we get included whenever we have the work session, and I don't know, they may have mentioned it, and I probably can't remember. But can we get a capacity for all of the magnet schools? in
What
a
about
report?
all
I
of
mean,
them?
yeah, for
Just
all of them.
all the magnets or all
Yeah.
schools?
For all the magnet schools,
Okay.
magnet.
I think the next one Leslie says is July 9th, work
Okay.
session. July 9th. Okay. So as you think of your questions, would you please forward them to Leslie, and we'll get the right people to, is that right? The 16th, she says. I'm sorry, July 16th. So if you'll send the question in writing, and the only reason I'm saying this is because there's so much going on and transfer of information and questions coming from all over, the state, the city, the board, everybody's asking a lot of questions. So it's good for us to have it in writing that way and in a timely manner.
Okay,
Let me say that.
since this is a work session, nobody knows that they can apply to BTW, so how can we get that out? Can we put that on the website somewhere, opening, what
Is
can
that
we
on,
do?
it's not on there now?
It needs to get out.
We can make sure that it's on there
Okay,
about
please.
applications.
I
And
mean,
we have
like-
to deal with that application process and make sure we're not stepping on our own toes right now.
That'd be
To
great.
s-
Right.
to
And-
see
I
what-
mean, it shows that we're trying, and I appreciate that.
And perhaps our friends in the media can help us with that, too.
And one more thing, and this is more of an advocacy thing. I know that our traditional schools are packed, and it is because of the state numbers where so many kids fit this, you can be in a classroom here and there. Is there some advocacy with, from superintendents especially, where they're asking them to reduce the class sizes, the number of students in the classroom? Because I think that will help us out a
Yeah,
lot.
I think what happens, the reason you earn as many teachers as you do right now is that they use a smaller divisor for the younger kids, the smaller, younger grades, first kindergarten. They use a smaller divisor, which might be, I can't remember if it's 10 or 12. So that helps you earn more teachers. But at the higher, remember, it's $150 a day. A school can have one, back up. A teacher can have 150 kids per day. Most of them don't have that many, but they can teach up to, and then there's a little bit of a leeway of a little bit more than 50, a little bit less, because it's not gonna come in a solid 150 like in an elementary school. You're gonna say, well, I'm gonna have 1 to 20 in my first grade. It's not quite that easy in high school, but we do try to get the divisors, and one time the divisor for younger kids was 18 to 20 or something, so they did reduce it so you could earn more teachers.
On the secondary end.
Secondary, the divisors are about 20, 25, it's higher, it's not as low as elementary.
I just was wondering if anybody was advocating.
Yeah, we
because I think
did,
that
and that's
would
how we got it, but right now, I think they're asking for smaller divisors in middle schools.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's where they're trying to make up the difference in the middle school area.
Just a little bit in grade 4 through 6, if I'm not mistaken, or this year.
Decreased it.
A few more additional units for this year.
But that was for 250
Yeah, 250 teachers statewide.
Statewide.
Right, so it's not gonna be many for us.
And last time they did that, I think we received maybe 2 teachers for the entire
it's so
system, so
small.
it's such a small number, I can't remember what the number was. But when we put that information together, if you wanna know what the actual divisor is, I just got a note to myself to say, give you the divisor, also so that you know what it takes to earn an AP, what it takes to earn a counselor. I think that'll maybe help you see what we show them when they come.
And special ed students are counted.
Not entirely. I think part of what we've done, and HR can help me with this, I think what we've done in Montgomery is that we've just sort of taken a lot of local units and added, and that's why our local numbers may be up. But the state allows you to take a portion of your allocation and take care of your special ed needs and career tech, so that your allocation is, your overall allocation is not anymore, but you take a percentage, for instance, in every school, because some of their students will be special needs students. They may be going across town to another location, but so you can take a portion, like if this school, let's say one school earned 26.5, that 0.5 can be combined with somebody else's 0.5, and that would be a whole unit that could become a special ed unit in another area, or in that school even. So that the formula does give you some leeway. In the past, we've kind of taken local money and just taken care of all of our units, but where we are now, we need to relook at what we're doing, so because we don't have the money in the funds to have so many local units.
And I just want to add to that, that's what the local fund does. It takes care of, helps you to be a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, and it gives you room if you want to have 5 foreign languages instead of 1, and you want to pay for 4 of those out of local money, then you can do it.
If you have it.
If you have it in your local money.
Yes.
I just wanna make the comment, I think, we need to open up the portals, get everything out, because if you look at it, if we do actually pull these students that come in, you're gonna take away from the some of them from the traditional schools, and you're not gonna have those overcrowded classrooms, because they're gonna be moving over to.
But we don't want to lose the unit in the traditional school either. That's because if you pull too many kids, you
Yeah, but
lose.
we just said we have overcrowded. If you have overcrowded, you don't wanna, you can't, I don't think, we talked about that earlier, I don't think you can have over 32. Well, if you're dropping 140 teachers, we're looking at,
But there's a limit.
overcrowded classrooms.
There's a limit though, am I correct? There's a limit of how many
Isn't
children
32
there.
right, or what is the
32
limit?
for what?
What is the class size, what's the most in the classroom? How many students can be in a
It
classroom?
depends on the grade level. It's
It's
not an
different in the
exact.
elementary, middle,
Okay,
and
well,
high.
that's right, just pull out, just pull it up.
Well, in 11th, it's not per class, it's 150 per day. Now, if they schedule so that they have fewer periods to teach, then they're gonna have larger class sizes. So if
I
they,
thought there was some law, I mean, I really don't
The
know, I thought there was
law
some
is
law that you couldn't have over 32 in a classroom.
No,
no,
150 per teacher. You divide it
knew
up
that.
however you want, so if they
so if
want
you divide it up and you say, I have 2 planning periods and I only have 4 periods to teach, and I got 150 kids, that's 4 into 150. But if I decide I'm gonna have 5 periods to teach and 1 planning period, then that's 5 into 150.
Have we ever
And so
had
your
system
class
to-
size
have we
goes
ever had
down.
No, she just using it as an example,
It's-
Lisa.
Well, be real, okay?
Now, I am being real, I'm giving you some real examples, Dr. Key.
Face it.
I'm giving you real examples.
Okay.
So it depends on how you schedule. If you schedule to have 4 periods and that's all that teacher's gonna teach in a day, and have 2 planning periods, and she has 150 on her roll, that's 4 to 150. If you have 5 periods to teach, that's 5 into 150. You have fewer kids in your classes. That's how you make up your class size.
Oh, sorry, I was just listening, kind of caught up there. Okay, the students first A. And I'm just going off of some things that I know that, that were brought up from the last time. specifically, and for me, I wanted to know, how does that play into the RIF in addition to, and this one wasn't on here, but the Accountability Act, because I know that it was in our last board special call meeting, it was talked about the principal tenure, if you were, some people were grandfathered in, and I just wanted to get a little details on which one are we looking at? Are we looking at students first? Are we looking at the Alabama Accountability Act when it comes specifically for someone that was tenured, or last tenured in a principal's position? I was just confused and just wanted some
Okay.
clarification. Oh, okay.
Please.
I'll try to just talk to you in my teacher voice while they work on this. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Can you repeat the question?
I just wanted to know, the last board, at the last special call meeting, there was an issue that came up about the, the Students First Act, and about principals being grandfathered in to tenured positions. And I really wanted to know, because I know there's the triple A, well, not the triple A, well, it's called Alabama Accountability Act.
Okay.
I call it triple A, I guess.
I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
and the Students First Act. So in that case, when it comes to principals who were tenured in, or grandfathered in, excuse me, which law do we look at?
Okay, really a loaded question, because it's, and I'll just start, I'll start like this. And then Alicia, if you need to correct me in any way, please do that. I actually got 3 legal opinions on this, and I all got the same answer for the question before we started all of this. And it is, if you are a sitting principal in a principalship and you were grandfathered in, you're grandfathered in. Because then you fit under the Teacher Accountability Act, and I think that's the one you're talking about, for principals. When you leave that position and you become whatever else that it is, central office personnel or whatever else that is, then you fit under the Students First Act. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of, not?
It does and it doesn't, because I
Right.
figured if you were grandfathered in, then that.
As long as you are a principal.
As long as you are the principal
Because
in the position,
the way
you
it
just
was ex-
can't leave it.
Right.
Okay.
The way it was explained to me, Ms. Smith, because I actually had some questions about it as well. And when I have a question, I know I'm not an attorney, so I call some of them. The way it was explained to me is that, the reason I say it's kind of blurred, because you're also talking about a reduction in force. And that kind of changes it as well.
And that's that was my third question.
I knew
That's
where you
it.
were going with that, because those were all of my questions as well. But for that portion of it, a reduction in force is a layoff, okay? Which means that you're laid off. As a system, we tried to put people who had been here many years back in a position that they could go into. They're not grandfathered as principals anymore because they were no longer principals. They were grandfathered as long as they stayed. Once you did not have a principal contract anymore, you no longer fit as a grandfathered in principal. For example, I'm a former principal. I was told I had no more rights as a principal. I gave that up. I am now a tenured teacher. I really used myself as the example, because of course I would have that question. Alicia, you want to add anything to it? No. Okay.
I did, I'm gonna tell you, I've done some checking on this and know for a fact that there is a capacity where we could have 100 more students over at DPW. And basically, if that would be your 10th, 11th, and 12th. They don't want 9 tuba players from the 9th grade. But I wanted to make sure that you have, that we could, I want to know that there's going to be announcements online. I heard approval up here, and I just want, not approval, but hello, at least we will check into it. Well, I'm telling you right now, I know for a fact there's open spots for at least 100 people.
Well, I think the best thing that we can do is make sure that those principals know what they can actually hold. I know what we've already told them.
This one knows.
I was gonna say, I know what we've already told them. My position is, all I can do is tell them. My job is to explain it and tell them.
Well, I'm telling you, I never made a statement up here at all that I didn't feel were true. And there's 100 spots out there right now. Okay, so just say that a little louder.
I understand.
Thank you. No, you said I know.
I
read your
understand.
lips. Okay. You know I'm gonna call you out, Kim.
Did she answer your question on that? Okay, thank you. Do we have,
Well, it's 2 more. I was going down the
Go
line.
ahead.
Okay, the RIF policy. And so that was my question, the last meeting, at the last special call meeting, was what type of measurement tool, matrix, what have you, rubies, whatever, did we utilize? And I know it's a layout, but my concern is really about special education teachers, mathematics teachers, because I remember there was an asterisk saying that we were trying to stay away from those areas. So what was used to determine who and where? And I know if it doesn't, I'm not trying to make it sound like, well, we just chose you over here, but not over there, because I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we're doing a RIF, are we not looking at positions that are critical for us, like areas we know we're going to need and may not need to touch?
And those were critical areas. We did protect those as much as we could. And when I say as much as we could, because sometimes we have to let people go because of performance, because of a drop in enrollment, and then you can't protect it. I can't keep you if I have an abundance of you and I'm doing a reduction in force. Or do you really want me to keep this person who does not perform well? Because then that teacher is in the room with kids and they don't have good performance. So we did protect some of those areas. So some of the things you saw in there and on your report, we put a little blurb down there to let you know you may see some of those people, but it's probably for a different reason. Remember, certification is another one of those pieces as well. We have to go by what the state tells us that they have to do to be certified. And we just recently got an awesome update, which is gonna, I hope, will really help them about emergency certificates. You know, I've always said, and Dr. Keefe don't say, well, you said 5 years ago that you can only have one for the rest of your life. That was the rule. The rule as of this week has changed, that you can have more than one for the rest of your life. That's the state saying, okay, we realize that there's a teacher shortage. We realize that in order for you to get people in, they may not have educational certification in math, but there are some things that we can do to help you. Maybe 1 year on emergency is not enough. So we've been given a new number, and y'all correct me, is it 4? You can have it up to 4 years, which is going to happen for us, because think about it. A lot of those things you see math teachers, and I get up here and I say every time without calling their names, I say, well, it's certification. Usually if they've used up their 1 year emergency and they haven't taken those classes, what choices do I have? Because I can't get them a certificate.
Okay, share this one, and I was writing notes, but I noticed math teachers actually on this list, and I thought we were not touching them.
She just explained.
Well, I was writing notes, so that's
why they're on there. There are other reasons. Remember,
okay, so that because of the certificate.
Right.
Okay. Then
It
you
could
don't
be
have to go back
certificate,
over
it could be several reasons. Remember, I put several reasons on there. I don't want you to tie me down to one, because every one doesn't fit in one particular category. Now, the good thing is, if it was an emergency certificate and we told them you can only have one for your entire life and you didn't do blah, 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 we've got to go back and look at all of those. So you may see some of those people appear back on your report, because now they can have 4. But we didn't know that last week. We just got that a few days ago. If we had known that a month ago, your report would look very different as far as math and, you know, some of those other specialty areas are concerned.
And I did tell Dr. Moore when she mentioned about the math and all, and keeping them, I said, if they're not performing, you know, they have to go.
Absolutely. And you know how that works. When you have a bad teacher or someone who doesn't perform for 3 years, and they've
Right.
had 3 years of
Students
kids,
and- yeah.
do they ever really recover?
Yeah. So I think we need to think of it in terms of, for instance, if we say we're protecting the category of math,
Right.
but not necessarily an individual.
Right.
We have to look at both sides of that. But if you're math and you're stellar, no issues, you have your certification, that is a protected class. But that doesn't keep you if you're not performing well, even
Right.
though you may be a math teacher.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll make it, well,
Okay. So if there is a math teacher, you know, that is being non-renewed, and will they be replaced at that school?
If that school earns, that's the other piece. See, this is not a, like, everything one size fits all kind of a maneuver that we have to do. If they've earned a certain number of teachers, say they earned 20, but they had 21, and a math teacher retires and they don't need to replace that person, then they're down through their 20 through attrition. So as we look at this, we have to look at several different kinds of things that kind of bounce around on the page. But if they lose a math teacher who's not performing well, let's say in this case, but they've earned 21 and they only now have 20, then yes, we replace that person. Now their replacement might be from across town where they had more math teachers than they earned. So we can slide them, and so you have still a net reduction of 1. But we can slide someone through transfer over into that slot. So now you have your 20 that you've earned, and over here you only earn 20, so you don't have 21. We just slid somebody over under the right circumstances to fill in that slot. But a net reduction now of 1 between those two places.
and
Do we have a contract or a company that manages our magnet programs?
No, we have someone that helps with the lottery piece. We have a software kind of.
But then whoever figures out who the qualifications are and stuff like that, is there somebody up there, because I did hear that they were talking to some people up there that were coming up with some erroneous things that they were disqualifying and stuff.
We give them the data to put in. And so we have to put the data in correctly. I mean, that's a given. We have to put it in correctly. We have to put everything in there that's supposed to be in there. And then the software does the lottery piece.
the last one is the RIF plan by category. Now, I know this was explained to me, Dr. Moore, that the RIF was for personnel, but I wanted to know, and I know that we're saving $9 million as far as personnel goes. I wanted to know what other things were we looking at. I know I've mentioned contracts probably more times than you care to hear, but, and the goal is to get to the 12 million, but in order to preserve some of the positions on the ground, are we looking at, what other options are we looking at? I know there's been budget, you know, there's been a 20% cut in budget, and of course personnel being reduced, and the schools are getting the units that they earn versus having these excessive units. But what other things have we looked at? Because I'm just one of those people, I just really, and this is just me, feel that if we can preserve more in the classroom, and I'm just trying to figure it out, but if we could keep more teachers in there and just look at some other things, the contracts, even if we had to do, and I almost probably gonna regret saying this, but a 1 or 2 day furlough just to save money. But these were some, I know, your face, just as an option, not that we're doing it, but I'm just saying, you know,
The
I'm just
military
putting
can
it
do
out.
that, we can.
You know, but what other things are we looking at? And that's just just an option, but what other things seriously are we looking at to help us to save money and keep some of our most important resources, which are our teachers, in the schools.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Mr. Watts to help me with this, but I'm gonna make a statement. Okay, so probably 80 to 85% of our money is spent on people, because we're in the people business. So we have teachers who are out in the schools working with kids. So that's number one. So yes, we're looking at contracts. We're looking at, we did a 4-day week, hoping to cut back on the utility bill. We're looking at, material supplies.
In schools, or we look at purchase services, contracted services, everything outside of, well, I'll just say this, we are looking at all of the non-personnel items as well. And what we stated to all department heads, let's look at every single line item we have in our budget. And let's just, ensure that we are only budgeting for those necessities. And that's what we're trying to do for 2020.
So, Mr. Watts, then my other question would be, is there any way to provide the board with, like, the point where you've made the cuts and adjustments and the total savings so that we can, see as well? And I say that because I think it will help, us to get the information out into the community, because I'll be honest, there are a lot of people in the community who are concerned about the teacher cuts. Because on one hand, they're like, there's a teacher shortage, and you were needing teachers and you were at a job fair, then on the other hand, you're cutting. So just to kind of, for us to be able to take it back to the community and say, these are the things we looked at, and this is the reason why we chose to go this direction. And then it'll just inform us.
Sure. But I do want us to keep in mind, as Dr. Moore stated, that you're looking at close to 85% of our total expenditures, staff and benefits. You look at another 4 to 5% of utilities. These are things that you have to do, you have to have. Then you do want to budget a percentage for building repairs, those air conditioning, and those kinds of things. So when you get down to it, you may be looking at maybe a 4 to 5%, where you may have a little bit of wiggle room to make a few adjustments. And those adjustments are very, very few, but certainly we can provide that for you.
And so always following up on you. So I can say one thing? Yeah. To have the community understand, when we say there is a teacher shortage across the U.S. and in Alabama, in certain areas. We don't necessarily, if we lump all of our teachers together and say we have this many teachers, if they could teach any and everything, we probably wouldn't have a shortage. But in math, we have a shortage. But a pre-K kindergarten teacher can't teach math, algebra 1, whatever. So if we just lump them all and say we got this many teachers, we wouldn't be short. But when we start looking at those subject areas that they are certified to teach in math, and especially in some of those other areas, that's where we have a shortage, and that's why we can have a recruiting fair.
We can try to find those people that fit into those protected categories that we talked about. So again, it's not oranges and oranges, it's kind of apples and oranges. And you kind of have to be aware of what you have in your system and what your needs are.
Okay, I get it, but I just want, for the public who does not have access to the information we have, they only go by what they see on the news channels or what they read in the newspapers. And so it gives this perception that we're just letting go this influx of teachers and we're in need of teachers. So I guess to add to that, maybe Tom can work on just kind of getting some things out there on the PR end and a communication ends to address that. I know he does the Q&As or whatever, but to kind of really pump some information out there so that people won't feel a little nervous about what's going on.
Okay.
May I, Madam President? Okay, I do have a couple of questions. Surprise, Erica. All right, we got a form, and I think it was our not last week, but the week before, that Mr. Watts passed out that showed the personnel, the number of people that were going to be let go. Of that, to save the $12 million, I think it was adjusted or whatever. This was just a copy I had. So in the classroom teachers, there were 140 that were going to be let go at a savings of $9,800,000. Am I correct? in your form. Okay, you know what I'm talking about, this. So, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So, yes, it was an average salary of the teachers. So my question, and you may not know this right off, I mean, I think it's great that we're looking at utilities. You just said, though, that was about 4 to 5%, where personnel is 80 to 85%. And I come from a nonprofit world. I bring back, Leslie, all of my envelopes and everything. That's where I live, so that's, and I grew up very poor. So my question is, and I know y'all looked at this, but when I look through how many people are not in direct services to the children, the people that are not in the schools, to me, when I look at that list and I see that one director has 4 administrative secretaries, and, there's one department that has a director and 1 secretary. And so I'm a little bit maybe confused as to why this shows 140 teachers, and then in these other departments, it's 1 person, 4 people. Why were there not more people cut in central office for this, the support staff? Did I ask a bad question?
No,
Sorry. I'm sorry. No, I just, I know that, I have, and I'm going to say it, but I just know when I have to cut that my salary comes first, and my husband doesn't appreciate that, but that's when I give up my paycheck. And we look at, okay, I clean the toilets every week at my office. I'm not kidding about that. And so when I look at this, in my mind, I wouldn't take away the counselor of the child before I gave up some of my benefits. And I feel like that maybe some of these, departments that only have 3 or 4 people in them, maybe they share the administrative. Maybe one person answers the phone one day and the next day somebody does the emails. I guess that's where I'm a little bit disappointed that there's not 4 or 5 teachers, but then there's 50 from central office. And I might have asked a bad question, but hey, it's been on my heart, and I stayed up till 2 praying about this, so I knew I was going to ask it.
That's not a bad question. What's the average salary of an administrative secretary?
Okay, I'm trying to get to how much you'd save if you got rid of your support staff. About 30,000 per person.
That's a teacher, but it also sends to me personally, and as Erica was saying, the community, the perception is reality. And so you say, okay, we're also getting rid, or I hate to say getting rid, but we are also having to lay off 10 secretaries. No, that doesn't equal the same amount of money, but let me tell you, we are going to be equal in cutting at central office, equal cuts to the children. And I just feel like that's what we need to look at. That, no, it may not be that much money, but it is a teacher, or it's a half a teacher.
And if I may, at this point, I'll try to be brief. You've given us 2 different projection sheets, okay? One, the last time accounted for 12,818, 200, you came down a little bit. On this new one that you just gave us last week, you pulled out 4 counselors and 1 librarian. So I don't know why you did that, but you still are looking at a 12,500,000, okay? Which you just told us when I asked that I had to add a 2.8 to the 10, or 2.3. So we were at 12, it was 2.8. So we're really 12.8, if I got my figures right, okay, from what you just said. And this year's only 12.5. Okay, what you've done, and this is just a suggestion, I told you last week, I do not understand why we need executive directors. I do not understand why we have all those vacant seats when we are in a RIF. When you are in a RIF, you are in a reduction in force. You are certainly not trying to put more people in central office that aren't even going to be around the children, okay? So understand where I'm coming from on that. With that being said,
let me say for one faint moment that I decided to go, okay, I get it, you need it. But I want to go back and remind you that last week when I asked you for a job description for these executive directors, we were going to defer to Kim. But nobody really knew. We even had Mr. Mitchell pipe up and go, oh, we need a math, we need reading. And I went, well, that's funny. Why would you take away those educational specialists? Well, I got to thinking. I went over and watched the YouTube that's had over 2,064 views, by the way, of interested parties out there. And what I don't understand is, let's say I bought into your thing that you've got to have these people to help. And I'm going to give you a job description, okay? Because y'all couldn't give me a job description. Why not forget the little executive directors that are going to top out 104, and you pretty much told me it was going to be 104, and I told you all you were doing is a shift from the principal leads to that. Then why not turn this into 3 educational specialists? Because I looked at the numbers on that. The top out of that is 75. 75,000 times 3, you're at 225,000. You have just bought 3 people instead of 2. Then I went and did more math. Let's forget doing that. We need teachers, okay? So do you realize I did the math, and you would get 5.9 teachers with that money. $2,008 is what you have, 104 times 2. Okay, divide that by brand new teachers just coming out of the system, ready to teach, and you divide that, you'd have 5.9 teachers. I even went a little bit further, okay? And I said, hey, let's try the master's degree. You would buy yourself 5.2 teachers. So, you know what? Here's the deal. The people that you want in those positions, those principal leads that you all guys are pretty much programming and catering, a job description to them, they won't take that. Because, see, they would only be going from 110 to 104. Oh, you can cock your eyes and go, hello. I do know. Like I said, I'm not psychic, but those seats, those vacant spots, and I'm telling you this, until y'all change that org chart, Lisa Keith, on that personnel, don't count on me on anything. Because the org chart should come way before we're voting for personnel. I'm done.
Okay, so, Dr. Keith, if I might respond to you quickly. When you look at your reductions and the amount of money you want to save, you certainly want to make that savings in your general fund. Anything else is soft money that you can't count on being there more than a year or 2. If it's grant money, whatever it is, even federal dollars sometimes will be diminished. So you can't count on that. That soft money, it might go away. Your general fund is your solid number that you know you're going to get from the state every year based on your teacher allocations. So I think when we're doing the math, we have to also remember all of the other parameters that go along with your funding sources. Your funding sources are not the same. Your general fund typically is going to be where you get those allocations for teachers or whatever you get out there in the schools, principals, whatever. That's general fund money. That's where you have to start deciding where can we save so that we are not trying to spend money out of the general fund that we don't have. And that's your solid number that you can count on every year. You're going to get a certain amount of allocation. The other money, soft money, everybody, grant money, you all know that. You can't depend on it. You might write a proposal and get it funded for 1 year. You might not. But you can do some things with it during that 1 year. But you can't count on longevity with that money because it may go away. The grant source may even go away. So we are trying to balance our budget through what we do in the general fund. That's where we're trying to get. And the general fund is where we have the deficits. Not in anything else. It's in the general fund.
May I ask a question then? So on the org chart, is there any way that we can get the funding source for every job, including the vacancies? What funding source are they coming out of? And I think that may
General or title.
Yeah, general or Title I money. So that will clear some things up.
We can, for the most part, yes, we can do that. Break it down. And now, you've heard us talk over the last few weeks about how, because Title I is supplemental, that you can do some things with it to recoup even out in the schools. For instance, when you have a school that gets $600,000 in Title I money pretty much per year, then that school can decide, I want to take my 600, and even though my class size may now be at 30, I want it to be at 25, so I can take some of my 600,000 and hire a teacher out of that Title I money. Now, that's not true for every school. If it's not a Title I, they don't have that. They can't do it. But any Title I school, which I think we have, the majority of our schools are Title I, even in the high schools.
But I think it, just again, for clarification, if we could just get what the fund source is for the positions on the org chart, I think that would kind of help with some clarity.
Okay, and when we have, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this one, our non-tenured, okay, we have non-tenured leadership that it is not fair to keep some of the non-tenured leadership. I did my homework on this, and what I found is we have, I'm not gonna say who, but we have chief of this, we won't call it, but, well, I'll go there, chief of support, okay, student support, okay? That person, from what I'm hearing, okay, has never been a principal and does not have administrative certification. So tell me how we are keeping that in central office. How can we look at tenured people that could be put in that spot, yet we will keep the non-tenured? I'm not getting where you guys are pulling your leadership from and why we're keeping that and why that's not something that we are considering that we don't need. We have plenty of people, I mean, I'm just saying it like it is. Why are we keeping our non-tenured personnel at such high dollar, we're looking at six figures.
Okay,
And
so,
that, I just have a problem with it.
so, I will attempt to address that.
I'm sorry.
Ready?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so, when you have a person, one person in a position, only one, it's not like you have 100, let's say teachers, because that's what we're talking about. You have 100 teachers in a school. You only have one person, since we named it chief of student services. You have one. So you're gonna replace that person with somebody else. That means you're gonna take somebody from somewhere to put them in that spot. It could be a principal or someone like that who's certified. Now you gotta replace that principal at that school. It's fruit basket turnover in a way. If it's necessary to do it, for instance, if we had principals who had tenure like they used to, not on contract, and we had a principal, more principals than we needed, then in that scheme, it might make sense to take that extra principal and say, I'm gonna non-renew the person who's in student services and move that principal into that slot. That's not the case. That's not the case that we have. So every time you move somebody into a slot for which they qualify, if they're out there in the ranks somewhere, you probably are gonna have to replace that person that you moved.
Okay, listen to what just came out of your mouth, Ann.
I know
You
I
said,
did.
for which they qualify. I just said, not certified, never been a principal. I buy into your fruit basket mentality. We had a superintendent, two or three superintendents that played the fruit basket game too. I'd rather play fruit basket than come up with new baskets. You guys are coming up with, in your new basket, this is what's crazy about it. You went back to an old org chart that you guys agreed didn't work. And now I think because you can't make up names anymore, we're going to go back to an old thing and go, okay, hey, that'll work. That sounds good. Let's put that up here. And we don't need those positions. We don't. We need teachers. How are those people up there affecting those kids, especially when you could not even answer it last week? Kim couldn't either, and when Bernard went, oh, by the way, that's reading. You guys don't know what your left hand or right hand's doing. Or Bernard, I had to go, Bernard, that's a great one-sentence answer there, and he quickly got quiet because he knew I got him on that. You know, how do you come up and say, we need somebody for reading, but y'all took out that reading specialist? I just suggest that you get somebody that can back some of you guys up, okay? And y'all need, somebody that teaches the right hand with the left hand, or if you're going to get up here and brown nose, okay, you better know what's coming out of your mouth before you say it, because this girl up here has done her homework.
I think you're misinterpreting
No,
some of
I
the
doubt it.
information that you're looking at. That's what I think. I think you're misinterpreting it. But I don't think we need to have a dialogue about it, because I can't convince you that you're
I'm
misinterpreting
done,
it.
I promise.
Well, and am I correct? Administration on a statewide level is approximately 5% of the budget, and we're at 3.8.
We're less than. That's what they recommend for your central office type people. Now, the other thing, I think.
Say that again, Claire.
Okay, so statewide, 5% of your total budget is allocated to administration. That's central office. And we are currently at 3.8.
Okay, that's awesome.
So, you know, I would beg to differ that the org chart that was presented, now, you can call it this or you can call it that. To me, the name is just a name for somebody that is there to serve the people that are in the schools. And you have to have a certain amount of that in order to run the system. That's how I see it. And org charts to me are, it's something, it's your guide. It's your guide.
But how is it, Claire, that went under, say, Clinton Carter? We had far more people, we had far more students and less top-heavy at central office. We did it then.
Well, I wasn't here when I wasn't on the school board when Clinton Carter or any other superintendent you've mentioned. I know that this superintendent is trying to get our budget into some kind of order so we can grow again. And in order to grow, we've got to grow our student population because we have to be better at what we do. We have to, you know, you mentioned the magnets. My thought on it is that every school should be a magnet.
Thank you.
Every school should offer students the opportunities to grow. We can't do that if our house isn't in order, and our house is not in order right now. We are in the extremely painful place where we have to make these cuts. We're in this extremely uncomfortable position that we probably need to pass an org chart and get beyond these reports we have so that we can grow. Because right now, we're stuck, and you're helping us stay stuck because you've got your facts and your figures, but you've got to look a little bit beyond that into what can we do, not what have we done.
Okay, Claire, let me just, I appreciate you bringing that up, okay? But you keep saying we got to move forward, okay? You use the excuse, I wasn't back there, I wasn't on the board. But when people are up here telling you facts of, hey, we had more students and less central office, what makes you blind to that? What does not register up there?
A lot of things register with me that don't register with you. Because from a business standpoint, and
I'm not
education
swooned by a
is
superintendent. That's all I can say. I'm just not swooned.
Education is a business. You know, I'll stop to listen to you.
No, you're right. I apologize. I really mean that.
You know, education is a business. It's it's probably the most important business that we have in our lives, whether we're on this school board or outside there. And we've got to attempt to do it right. We have to move forward, one way or the other.
I was offended by your saying that I'm keeping us stuck. I beg to differ.
Okay, may I say one thing maybe to help add a little clarity, I hope, maybe not muddy the water. But 10, 15, 20 years ago, we did not have the kind of requirements that we have from the state, the Accountability Act, the different ways we have to report information to the state, the way we have to report attendance, the way we have to report assessment data, the way we have to try to match, to bring our students up in performance so that we're not on the failing schools list. That takes a lot of work and support from individuals other than people who are out in the classrooms. Times have changed. We're not like we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, as a principal, you could go in, you could open up your building, you could make sure that the toilets were flushing and the lights were on and your teachers were all there, and that's pretty much all you had to do. And you made sure you had children who were behaving, and you let the teacher go in the room and do her thing or his thing all day long. Now, we have all of this accountability and oversight coming from the feds all the way down through the state and through the local. And so times have changed, and so yes, we do have probably more people in positions in the central office than we had before, but they are required because of all the data that you have to collect and send to the state or send to the Fed. There are all kinds of reports that we have to do day by day, week by week, year by year. That is not something that we were expected to do years ago. Times have changed in that respect. And so we do need, and so we keep our people in the central office below 5%. We're at 3.5, 3.8. Some of those people that we designate and we call them central office people are actually resource people who go out into the schools to help principals and teachers do their jobs at a better level. We train them, we do all kinds of things to support them. So even though we use the word central office, I tease about this. Sometimes I say we are not sitting in the central office drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. You used to could get away with that. We don't do that anymore. We have to go out to the schools. Everybody goes out and they do what they can to help the teachers and the principals out in the schools and thereby support the students. So yes, the central office looks different from what it did 20 years ago, and there's a reason for that.
Are there any other questions? Our next, well, there's a meeting following here, and we will adjourn, and after that, the next regular meeting is June 25th at 5 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.
And now you're gonna open up your call board meeting. You can open this one up now.
Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order.
That was a work session.
That was a work session. We are now in a called meeting, and we still have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor signify by a show of hands. Okay. Dr. Moore?
Yes, ma'am. So I have a couple of three recommendations. One is to consider for approval, I recommend approval of the personnel report, certified personnel.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this?
I make a motion to approve the certified personnel report recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? All in favor of approving the certified personnel minutes report, please signify by a show of hands. All those opposed? Okay. That fails. Personnel report classified.
I recommend approval of the personnel report, classified personnel.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move that we approve the certified support personnel.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by a show of hands. All opposed? Motion fails.
I recommend approval of the organizational chart.
Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for the organizational chart.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the organizational chart, show by.
Wait, but can I say something?
Yes.
Is it too late?
Nope.
Is there a way that on the organizational chart, can we ask for changes, or do we have to accept it like it is?
I think we've had lots of discussions about the chart
Okay,
and its formulation, and so this is the particular one that I'm recommending.
okay, so if I ask, the positions that are vacant, do they need to be filled? Are they gonna stay on the chart and need to be filled, or is this up for?
They'll stay on the chart even without anyone in the position. For instance, I used last week, you were out, but I said, I think that a system this size needs a deputy, but I will not be recommending a deputy in that slot at this time because I've done that before and I can kind of shift from one to the other. But for future reference, someone might decide that they want to, you get a chance at that point to vote yes or no on a deputy. So even though it's on the chart, it's not automatic. You
So
get,
that's one spot, Jana, the rest of them would be filled, is what you told us in the last meeting.
you get to vote on whatever is recommended, as you do on all personnel issues.
Okay.
So whatever's recommended as a personnel item, you get to vote on it.
Okay. And so I wasn't here, so I don't know if this was discussed last week or not, so I don't know. So I did have questions under the chief academic officer, the 3 executive directors. Do we need 3? I mean,
At some point, you might. Right now, they're vacant, and so they're not going to be brought to you as a recommendation, though there are a few on here who are vacant that we would probably recommend. For instance, the counseling person left and went to another job, and so we need someone in that position. So at some point in the near future, you would get a recommendation for a counseling person. You would also probably get a recommendation on a math person. Some of those spots, like the deputy and those executive directors, are on hold until further notice, and then at that point, you would get to vote on them. But some of them are vacant because somebody left.
okay, so by us, voting for or against, we're not voting saying that we are voting to have those vacancies filled. We're just voting on the organizational chart. I just want to be
Correct.
clear on that.
Correct. So if I'll use the deputy again. If I decided that at some point, a year from now, it would be a good time to hire a deputy superintendent, then we would advertise that job. That recommendation would be brought to the board, and the board would get to vote on it.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Those in favor of approving the organizational chart, please signify by a show of hands. And those opposed? Motion fails, and we are adjourned.